My name is Stacy Longwell-Sadowski, and this is an oral history interview for the National Park Service and also Preserve Historic Sleeping Bear, the Leelanau Historical Society, and 2 Weeks in a Hammock. Today I am interviewing Bill and Karen Rosa. We are going to be talking about their family history on North Manitou Island. The Rosas have recently published Remembering Crescent, Logging and Life on North Manitou Island. Today is January 24th, 2025, and we are in my home in Cedar, Michigan. Okay, Bill and Karen, why don't you tell me a bit about your family's history on North Manitou Island?
Well, the family history kind of begins with the need for somebody to look after the sawmill and run the sawmill and fit with all that went on with that aspect of it over there when William Hull of the Ovalwood Dish Factory needed somebody. He got a hold of my grandmother's dad, A.J. White, and my grandmother was Esther Morse. And so he needed somebody that was able to run the mill, put it together, look after all that. So in 1907, they went out to the island, and till 1915 were they there year round with the sawmill coming and going and everything that took place from the timber, the cutting of logs, everything about what went on. So the family consisted of my grandmother. She was with the years, so she was her birthday was on October. So it was really 1907, 1908 that they were there, and then her older sister Nellie was part of the family, and her brother Jim worked in the mill with AJ, with her AJ, and of all the time that they were there. There was 250, 300 people that worked with the mill, worked with the logging, worked with all the animals, everything that consisted of everything that it took to make that operation run. And ultimately, they got a locomotive. They had 2 locomotives there, so they had about 6 miles of railroad track and logging cars. And in the wintertime, they used sleighs, but they used a lot of big wheels. In the summertime, getting logs to the rail, because mind you, it was on the beach, and they were like I say, 5-6 miles of rail, and so that's how that went with getting the logs there. And other family people that was there was cousins. AJ's brother worked there. AJ's brother Mont and cousin Billy Good, they were all Goods, Whites, and Kates were all intermingled with family, and so there was a lot of family that was there working at the time, and other families names that belong to the Solon area because that's where where they come from. When they come from Ohio, that's where they settled, was in Solon, Michigan. And actually they were from Solon, Ohio, part of them, and that's why it was called Solon, because they come from Solon, Ohio. So that they had lots of family and lots of friends that worked there, and there was families from Lake Ann that worked there, families that we have friends now that are our age, family that's got kids, and a lot of ties of families that worked over on the island.
I think it's really interesting to see like the bigger history of the family and how the family was involved in logging, and Crescent was just one location.
It was the second or the third beginning.
Yeah, and then they moved out from that. And tell me more about your grandmother. Did she end up moving to any of these other locations, or did she stay in Lake Ann?
Well, she would have been at Carter Siding. They would have been over at Carter Siding because it's only 1915, and they're only there for a short time till the first child of the second. Well, I'm not sure if you're remembering, but in the book, the first mother got killed at Interlaken on the M&NE when the car hit the train hit the car, and she was killed. And little Jim, little Jim Thurlby, their grandson, was with them, but my grandmother wasn't with them. But AJ survived, and the grandson survived, and his name was Jim Thurlby, because his folks both were Traverse City. Well, the dad was Traverse City Thurlbys, if you will, and they died in 1913. Jim was born in 10, so he was just a small kid. But the grandmother died, and so that's when he married the housekeeper, and so they were there at Carter Siding. And my grandmother was there. Then in 16, she was down to Woodson with them for a while. And then, of course, when they come back in 19 and whatever, my grandmother's married in whatever year at Lake Ann. And now they're farming, and they're farming with AJ and all that going on at Lake Ann. And then when Jim calls up from Eastman Kodak in 26, he says, Dad, can you come down? We need to do this, that, and the other. And so they pick up, and they think nothing of it. Now you jump in the car today and going to run down to Woodson, Virginia, or Kingsport, Tennessee. It's quite a trip, let alone in 1915 and 16 and 26. And so that's a little bit of it. And then, like I say, Jim ended up living down in Tennessee, and the other two kids come back, and AJ come back. He never passed till 1958. So see, I'm 14 years old, and AJ's been around all this time, and my grandmother's been around, and so, but do we ask a lot of the pertinent stuff? No, but my Aunt Helen did, started. That's how we come to be when her and I first started with the presentation that Dave had done over at Empire. And that's how, and I mentioned that in the book, that Dave was so instrumental. What little did he know that we put together something that we felt of value, that would go on for a long time, that people could understand about that little town of Crescent, that people have written about, had pictures of, but not to the degree that we had, because they had their own camera at the time, and they lived it. And what everybody else writes about was third party, I guess, but it was our people. And if we didn't tell the story, a lot would be left out, at least we feel, with what the amount we put in the book. And so that, that's where that is.
So tell me about how the book got started. You were starting to say that you and Dave Tygon got together and were looking at.
Well, we didn't necessarily get together with Dave. It was the kind of thing.
It was a presentation.
We knew we wanted to do something with our pictures, to some degree, and the history. But to what degree did we know that we wanted to do? Well, the minute we seen the program that David put on about the Empire Lumber Company, with all the slides and talking about this and that and all the history. It was my Aunt Helen that went, and right then we decided that, well, that's what we need to do. So we started. Well, it wasn't long. It would have been a year. Wasn't much over a year, but Aunt Helen passed away. So we're saying, oh, well, here we are. But she had done quite a little bit of interviewing with my grandmother, with notes on a back of a note envelope, and on the back of this, and on the back of that. And my grandmother wrote like I do. You had to interpret it with this and that, and it all worked. And we had a lot of notes, and we had a lot of pictures. So we thought, well, let's put this together. So that's when we decided that we're going to make this work one way or another. So we started putting pictures together, and we had all kind of postcards and pictures that were taken with their own camera. A lot more than what anybody else had, to the degree that we had the camera over there, family did, and the only thing anybody else had was the photographer's photographs of postcards. Seemed like everything was postcards then. And so what we had to put together, and along with that, now a lot of people have done a lot of good history with it. Jack Hobie did with his postcards of Leelanau County. Now Jack did a great job, and so I don't mean to slight what people had put together. In the same way with Rita, the info that Rita had and how she put stuff together. But if you'll notice, she interviewed my grandmother too, with some of the stuff that she put together in that book. And so between it all, there's a lot of different things, that aspect of whatever went on. But we just knew that we had quite a little bit more information and pictures to tell a lot more story. And I don't mean that smart from our part, but between the pictures and living that with those two people involved, quite a lot of my life there as a kid out to the farm, that's what we had to do. So that's how we started with that. And so we worked at it little by little. And last year when we was down in Alabama, we was working on the book. We had got with the book people. In fact, we was trying to evaluate, because David always used Village Press with their book that they did, and we thought that's what we wanted to do. And I don't mean this awkward with the books that they put together, because they're ideal. But after we showed this to Doug Weaver at Mission Point, he said, we looked at all the stuff we had, and he said, I think, and he wasn't being smart, I know he wasn't, he said, you've got a whole lot more history of stuff that you need to put together than just a book that's a handful of pages you open up that's stapled together. And he didn't mean that smart. He meant that sincere, that it needed to be a whole lot more pages with the amount of stuff that we had. And I'm glad that we did that, and because they were really good to work with. And so all last year we was putting together, we knew what pictures had to go with whatever parts of the book, whether it was the logging, the sawmill, or the train stuff, the town, the people, anything about it. We were familiar with all the postcard stuff, so we was able to put together the stuff that had to go in the right places. And we had stuff written with each picture. Did we have the information about each section? That was where we had the help. And the other stuff too. I don't mean that we didn't get a lot of help, but we had a lot of stuff put together with what we wanted to say and how we wanted to say it. But they put together with the whole history of the family. You notice in the front of the book, we had put together kind of what we wanted to say. They improved on that. Each section, a fellow by the name of Ed from Beulah was the guy there was about 3 people that worked on it all the time. Heather in Traverse City was our key, and the gal that did the design and worked with how we laid stuff out to the degree with pictures. She was in Kansas City, Missouri. So we were back and forth with her all last winter from down in Alabama. Of course, we had our computer, and we had our copy machine, fax or not, well, yeah, we could send back and forth with everything we needed.
Email.
So we was doing that all the time, and they was sending us copies of this and that and how stuff was laid out and what was what. And so, and one of the things that we were tickled about was that they said, all of them that worked with it said that we had, for not being book people, that we had a lot of stuff put together and it was easy to work with. And I, like I say, don't mean that smart on our part, because we're not book people, but we knew what pictures had to be on what pages and what all had to be tied together and what we want brought out from different pictures. And Sarah over there was great with doing that, because if you look at the things, she's got a blue or green line drawn and it highlights stuff that we tell about stuff in the book, all the pictures and stuff that's pertinent to things that you don't know, and I know you don't know, because it's stuff that's relative to logging and all the pertinent stuff with the tools and different things about the mill and how come and why and with horses and all that. Not because we're that smart, but we fit with a lot of it enough to know that it worked out well for us to be able to try to make sure that we could tell about each picture, so you could gather up stuff that you didn't really know about. What was that telling us, you know? So all of those things really helped us with living a lot of the stuff back. Of course, we're 80 years old. We've been back long enough to know what was going on with a lot of stuff way back, kind of thing. So, to that degree, it was kind of easy to do, but the book people were really great. Mission Point Press, they for just like I say, not being book people, they were the people to go to for us.
So I will say two things that were amazing to me about the book was the level of detail in the logging, and the other one was the fact that so many of the photos have named people in
Oh yeah,
them.
right.
And so
Yeah.
how much of that came from, where did that information come from? Did your grandmother have labeled the pictures?
She'd well, number one, with this, like the school pictures and a lot of the pictures of the mill people, she'd went over with my aunt before all that, and knew all them names, knew who everybody was, and so that's where they come from, because she lived it, and she could write about it, and so that's all the more reason that had we not told the story, we wouldn't have had the pictures, we wouldn't have had the names, and a lot of those families you can trace down to today, with lots of things, with some of the names that were there, and a lot of those names we were working back and forth with to verify in the book that the Park Service had put out. What was it, tending a comfortable, yeah. So they've got names and years and different things that we was tying together. So, but a whole lot of pertinent information that we could follow up with, did we have, that nobody else was going to be able to put together. So it sounds like that we're the only ones that had it. Well, we probably were, but we wanted to make sure that you and everybody else could look at that and follow that up, and their kids could, and look back and say, oh, well, that was some of our family that worked back on the island back in that day about that little town. And lots of stuff has been written about North Manitou, but not to the degree of little town of Crescent. That there's only a couple different things. We've got down at the point, the lighthouse, we've got a few pictures of the lighthouse and tell about that. Thought that was pertinent. We've got one picture of the east side of Paul Molesky standing by that capstan, and that's on the east side. And he used to be, my grandmother said, well, Paul used to be the mailman in his day of back and forth from bringing stuff from the east side to the west side with mail. And I knew Larry Price, his great, it would have been it was Uncle Paul. It was his mother's people that lived out on the island. And Larry was a good friend of mine. And we was back and forth with information. So there's different people that were, and actually my grandmother knew young Paul Molesky, which would have been my folks' age, if you will. And she knew him and was back and forth with him after he was off the island and lived here, and that was young Paul. So there was ties that she had with people, kind of thing. In fact, one of the other people that we mentioned in there was Rose Gray. Now, Rose Gray was married to Bert Gray, and they lived over on the island at the time. And Rose, she was in a lot of the pictures that we got here. I don't know whether she followed the photographer around, but Rose is in a lot of pictures. So then on into time, Rose and Bert ended up going down over to Carter Siding. Don't have a lot of pictures about all of that, not very much. But down in Woodson, got a lot of info about Woodson. Now they were down there like a lot of the families that went. And then when they come back, on into time, Rose and Bert, they owned a store. They owned John and Sandy's store in Lake Ann. I probably even mentioned that in my Lake Ann history. They owned a store, and they owned the potato warehouse back in the day in Lake Ann, and that would have been that would have been in the 20s and 30s, if you will. Then on into time, Rose, they parted, and Rose ended up marrying Perrin Reynolds. Now Perrin Reynolds lives where the Hort Center is now. That's where the Perrin Reynolds farm. That's the Hort Center. Well, Perrin had married Rose, and Bert was doing whatever he was doing. But in 1937, all three of them pick up and they go out in our book. They're out to the island in 1927. They're out to Crescent, and so that's how that comes to be. And so then, my grandmother, of course, being friends with Rose from way back on the island days, she has always been an acquaintance with Rose, whether she was married to Bert or whether she was married to Perrin. And so she was friends with Perrin and Rose. That's how she become friends with Perrin. Even after Rose died, Perrin and my grandmother got to be good friends, and would go out to dinner now and then, and could talk about old times, because they all lived the old history, and Rose was part of that. So that's some of the ties from way back during 1907 to 15 to clear on up into the 70s and 80s. I haven't let you speak much at all.
No, I don't need to speak at all. I don't mean to speak at all.
Don't mean to not do that, but whenever you want to take over,
no, I
you
don't.
can.
This was your
No,
baby.
I understand.
I just helped you.
Well,
I was the
it wouldn't have
helper.
got done if you hadn't have been.
I was the helper. I was the helper.
Well, one thing I want to talk about is, okay, so you talked about the folks who went back in the 1920s, and you've got the photos from that visit. Talk about your grandmother going back. Did she only go back in the 70s and 80s? Once she moved off the island?
Yep. No, they never went back, because she was good friends with Rita in Cottage Row, where you could still rent in 76, 7, and 8. And so some of the family went, and dumb me, we didn't go because I thought I was too busy. And so, but family went, and Grandma went, my brother went, and a lot of the other family was able to go because they'd rent the cottage, and they'd stay for a week or two, and they could go back and forth over everywhere they wanted to go, and they would scout the old buildings, and so Grandma did that, and just loved doing that. But in between all of that time, we always used to go swimming. Not the only place we went, but we used to go with Grandma over to Otter Creek, because we used to go over there and walk the beach. Now that was back when Otter Creek, you didn't see anybody there but the neighbor. There was nobody around, and so, but she loved to go over to Lake Michigan, and we'd walk, and did we come home with a couple different stones? Probably once in a while, probably did. And but that was back when you could come home with a stone or two, and so, but in a piece of driftwood. But it was something to be able to go with her, because we just walk up and down the beach, and
She loved it.
could hardly imagine what must be going through her mind, with how much she loved the Lake Michigan. And then when she could go out to the cottages there, and she was on in the years, and was able to do that and fit with that through those years, why that was a big deal. In fact, the last years, maybe all of them years, Pete Jerica and Marl Day, they were taking logs off the island then on the barge and bringing them over to Lake Michigan hardwood, kind of thing. And so to think, the minute they get on the east side, there's logs laying all over the place, and she's right in her glory, because we're still logging. We went from one thing to another, and they're still logging, and so it was just her thing. And to think, even on into time, to be of that age, like I say, in '78, Grandma was with the years, so she was putting her 80. And being able to keep up with everybody that went over there. In fact, they probably all had to follow her, and so that was just a great big deal. And I just it bothers me to think that we had not done this because of remembering that I didn't go with them to the island, and we had to tell what we could, and I missed seeing what I could have her telling me firsthand over there, what she was seeing and whatever. And so I missed all that. And so that was all the more important that that we had to do. So, but she just enjoyed. But can you imagine? Why wouldn't you enjoy it? She enjoyed it during the tough years. Can you imagine being over on that island in the ice and snow, and it was nice in the summertime, and the wind that would come up, and what all went on, and back in the day, if you can imagine from the time they got there, and the dock was partly built, kind of thing, and we're living in a house that was built. We're building a mill, and we're doing stuff, and we're feeding 200 to 300 people, and we've got animals. We've got there, and of course the big fields that they talk about over towards Swanson's there, I think. Of course, they appreciate all the stuff that they had to grow for all the animals, and the amount of animals that they had to have to feed them, and the horses and the crew. In one picture, or a couple of pictures, I'm sure those were the people with the curry combs. You can see them sitting there to groom horses. That was all people that took care of the animals, and the grounds, the fields and all of that, let alone the people that cut the timber and loaded stuff on the rail cars and unloaded it and sawed it and handled all the lumber, put it in the pile and stuck it up out in the pile, loaded it again, put it out on the dock, loaded it again on the boat. Talk about labor intensified. If you can imagine how many times, if they'd had fingerprints or DNA on all that lumber that got to Chicago and wherever it went, why, they would have drove them nuts trying to sort it out who belonged to what. But it just had to be from her growing up from 7 years old and going to school and what went on and being a kid, and it had to be really something. And then to have her dad fit with that traumatic loss of the arm over there. You remember that from the book. Now, mind you, my grandmother was 12. My grandmother was 12 because it was February 1912 when he got his arm. It was a bad arm to start with a little bit because he got hurt in a hunting accident back in the Solon days, I want to say, and still had the use of it, but it just wasn't as good. And it was wintertime in February, and he had this big corduroy coat on, and so he's up at the head end of that conveyor on the bull chain, oiling that in the second story of the mill, because that come from the mill pond up to the second story, that bull chain did, and he was oiling, greasing that, got that caught. How come and why he was naive enough to think that why, number one, I'm not sure he's the one that run the mill. There was all kind of people must have been under him, and why he thought that he had to do the oiling of that chain and fit with that. I know why, because if he wanted to get done and done right, that was a white in him. That's probably why he did it. He wasn't any different than anybody else that had to be the key guide to look after things. And I don't mean that smart. I just mean that sincere, that's where he come from. So now mind you, they're over there on this island, and he's got this mangled arm. And my grandmother said, well, you knew where the house was, you see where the mill was. And my grandmother said that they could hear him holler when he got his arm caught in that hip pulley up there. Well, anyway, it mangled his arm, and I can tell you as a kid, it was off right above the elbow here, because he always had, after that, 1912, in February, he always had that arm off. Well, there was only one doctor, Dr. Murphy. Dr. Murphy, it was a mill doctor at the town, or the company doctor, and he was there, but he needed help. He didn't have enough help, so they had to they got old Doc Thurlby, which Thurlbys go way back in years with name, and they had to get him from Traverse City, and Dr. Freilich was in Maple City quite a lot of the years, and I'm not sure if he come from there to come over also, or whether he was in Traverse at the time, but you can appreciate that the only way in 1912 you got anywhere was by rail or by boat. Now mind you wasn't going to get in a boat jump up around, we're gonna take a little color tour up around Northport and think you're gonna get to North Manitou. So he got on, and this is a story from Grandma, which would be, they got on the Manistee and Northeastern, and of course at the south end of Lake Leelanau, there was the station was Fouch. Just prior to that, towards Travers was Hatch's Crossing, but it was Fouch right there at the end of Lake Leelanau. And so they got that far, got on the boat, got up to Leland, got down to the boat again, got over to the island. And so there was the 3 doctors that were over there at the time, and on the dining room table in Grandma's house there, they took off his arm right there, just below or above the elbow. And he said, and in the time he said, you take that arm and take it down to the mill and you burn it, kind of thing. And so now mind you, my grandmother's 12 years old. She's remembering, she's knowing all this. She's old enough to know what's going on. And to think back in the day that went on, boy, now you've got to be made of steel to think that you're going to tolerate all that. And so, to think that people fit with that kind of things. So it isn't that they didn't. And then, of course, the minute that we went from there over to Carter Siding in the 1914, in July, we had the car accident and we lost the first wife. Their travels in the lumber industry, it wasn't without a problem, without, what do you call it? Sorrow. Trials and sorrow. So they fit with quite a lot of things, let alone in the day of with no electric lights and no plumbing, no this or that, no matter whatever. And the things that my grandmother had to see happen in what she fit with had to be a tremendous amount of knowledge from the time they got there and watched it would have been the rest of the dock almost getting built till they were finishing the mill, and the logs coming in on the first load of logs in 1909 on the railroad and dropped in the mill pond, and the pile driving. AJ had broke his ankle when they were pile driving. That's another pitfall, when they broke his ankle when they were driving piling for the mill pond. And so from the logs getting dropped in there to sawing the logs and the lumber coming out and getting on the tramway, building the tramway out through the lumber yard to be able to stick up put stickers in between all the sort of air dry in the lumber piles, and then load up again and to be out on the dock when they're loading the ships would come in, the sailing ships. And see how they had to maneuver that. They weren't under power. All they had was wind power. With the sailing ships, the Stafford and the Stevens that come from Milwaukee, because they was taking stuff back to the Wisconsin side. A lot of not bark. Well, they did a lot of tan bark too that was peeled. They did a lot of that, but they took a lot of tailings. Anyway, it was the stuff that they cut off to start with. Anyway, that to see all of that happen, and then all the animals that had to get fed, all the people that had to get fed, all the bringing in of the crops, and all the fitting with everything every chore that everybody had to do, and go to a little school, and they only went just a few months out of the year. But and so from 7 to 15, did she live all that? And if she could have made a video, the minute she got done with that, if you got any idea what that would have been like.
The stories she would have had,
Yep.
So tell me about going to the island for the first time this last summer.
Oh boy. Okay, we were over on the east side 2 different times, but this time.
Yes, this time.
This time.
You were on the east side a couple times.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We went over with the boat one time, and we'd kind of done some things, and then I went over with Dave in the trip that they take that day, one
Yep.
day, and I did that alone, and got all the history that I could gather up with Dave and everybody then, but never to the other side. We went
Yes.
one time to think we was going to be able to get, but it was rough, and no
Couldn't
way
get
did that
in.
work. And I'm glad we didn't try to do that. So that was the first time over to Crescent. So that, you know, that what we want, where we want to start.
Yes, yep, so tell me about the first time you went to North Manitou Island to the Crescent village site.
You understand a little bit of this is kind of hard for me to tell because it was so important. You understand? So as I get rambling on about a lot of stuff that ain't particular right down to the nitty gritty, it's easier, you know. But anyway, well, so when Kim had said that they were going to try to put together a boat trip for us, why we couldn't hardly believe it because we didn't know with the other boat not running and being able to get over there, and it would have been awkward for us to try to think we were going to get across the 10 miles, the 5 over and 5 back, and think we're going to make all that happen. And we couldn't take no vehicles. We tried to figure out, well, we needed to do it by boat, or come by helicopter, or do something to get to the other side. Well, then when Kim was able to put that together, and the group up there, that maybe would work. Boy, we were just ecstatic to think that maybe that we could be able to do that. And then when she called and said, well, we got to figure out a date with the Grosvenors people there. I guess that's what we're calling them yet, even though it's it was Jimmy and whatever. I know he isn't one, but anyway, with the boat people, they've got boats that we're able to do that in and get up to shore if it's not too rough. So then, boy, we were all tickled to think we was going to be able to do that. Man, that talk about a number one on a bucket list. That was it for us. And so, and it worked out good. Wanted to find out if we could take the kids specifically to be able to go, so they could be a part of it. And boy, that was really good because they've been behind us with all of this. All of our family is. The other cousins, all the other people have been wondering when we're going to get this done, and they're all because there's a bunch of us. There's a bunch of other aunts and uncles, a few, not a lot, but then their kids. There's a whole lot of people that we're trying to make sure we got stuff put together, and what do we need to have, and so anyway, that worked out to do. So then when it come D-Day to be able to do that, why that really worked good to be able to go across and see the crib, and because Grandma always spoke of the crib, and it wasn't, and I don't mean this awkward, but when the crib was up for sale, I thought, oh my gosh, if we could have owned that and could have named it, and everybody could have seen it, could have been able to come and go, but it worked out good because we didn't need to own it, and it's still a thing. But my grandmother would have been so damn tickled that she wouldn't have known what to do. To think that because think how many times she's seen all that, you know. Well, of course the crib wasn't there till when?
later.
That was on into years. The light boat was out there for years. I'm not remembering exactly that. I'm losing that when that was. But anyway, so and then coming to the island and to realize how long it is and how much area there is, because I know it's about 12,000 acres, and putting everything together, we're going over all kind of info and stuff that I should try to remember, all the things that I should remember and some I don't, but so, and then we finally get over to where we're at, and we're able to look at stuff, and I can see the one piling above the water. There's only one piling above the water that's still there, if I'm remembering right, and yet I know all the rest of it's there because I'm the one that put it in the book from looking at it from Global Earth, or what was that? What you call it?
Google Earth.
Google Earth, Global Earth, whatever. And I don't mean that smart, but if you hadn't looked at that specifically for that, there's probably a lot of people maybe would have found it and realized that was still there. but unless you look right at it, you think, oh my gosh, that dock, you can see pretty near every foot of that thing that's under there. And will be there for quite a little while yet. It'll gradually deteriorate underwater, but boy, it'll be a long time. But there's only the one, and then to have pictures through the years from 27, from the beginning to 27 to 37 to when we were out there, and what Grandma had in 76, and then we're out there a year ago. To think that we could see all that, and then to get a stand on shore and look at that as we were coming in with the boat, and to try to imagine we're maneuvering a little boat around that's got power, and we're kind of trying to fit with what we're doing, and they were working with at the end of that 600-foot dock, coming in with the sailboats, and some with a lot with power on into time, and sails, and they're trying to come in, and you look at that right from the beginning, and you look on shore, and I can see all the piles of lumber off on the right hand side of where the dock was, and I can see where the stacks are, because I know where they are in the picture. I know where the house ought to be. I know where a lot of that should be, because I've looked at the pictures so much. And I can pretty near walk up to whatever I need to find, and to think how was I able to do all that? Elmer's crane wasn't there to set the big stacks, and all the 4 boilers had to come from the east side of the island by horse and wagon, because they couldn't bring them around. The dock wasn't done evidently at the time enough for them to bring the boilers over. So them come from the east side, all them big boilers that you see in the picture, and there was 4 of them. And all that stuff had to be manual labor. But if you notice, there isn't one picture in that book that you will see any of them people that there's one person that's overweight. Not a person. They all ate good. They all ate more than we all do. But there wasn't a person that was overweight. Somebody needs to show that person to me if they can find it. And the more we looked, and to think that all this went on, and there's nothing but the wind blowing, and the waves are rolling a little bit, and the sand's blowing, and I can walk up on top and see where stuff had to be, and there's nothing but grass and trees and stuff that's growing up that would have been bare, even back in 27 like we seen, and to think that all this went on, and it's hard to imagine. You just can't hardly fathom. But the more we went, then I knew that I had to find what I was looking for, and I kind of knew where I need to look a little bit with stuff, and I think you'll find that we did find the place where the house was. We kind of went right there. Now, our son Pete was over there hiking the year or 2 before, and they thought they had found where that was. Well, that wasn't it at all. That was down to the north farther. When we left that site and went to the north, where we walked out to the beach when we come back from around, that was where Pete thought that was. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure how many people that had ever been over there with people coming and going ever realized that's where that was where the house was. I don't know if there was many people that did, kind of thing. There may have been, but to find that, and once we could see that, then to find the skidway, and you look, and it's still there. It's 8 out down below where the logs were. They skidded the logs up, and I'm not sure how many pictures that anybody has of that skidway and what went on with that log rollaway of when they did that log in the last couple of years of doing that kind of thing, and bringing that up to the mill pond with that big old log loader that they had there. And and then it was really great to find, to look close and know what, and to find those logs still in the ground up where it was dry ground. Those cedar hadn't rotted away yet, and they were there. They were right there where and I know that's what it was, because there there was a couple that was in between. We scraped that off a little and found that. So that was right there where that was. And then when we started kicking around and went over by where ultimately we see the mill was, and where it was all growed up that we walked through, that was where the hotel and that stuff had to be before we went around to the end and around the wet area there and was up on the road. And when you look through the pictures, you can see the barn and some of the buildings way past the mill, and if depending on what angle, and I think that the town was down a little farther to the north than what we started out thinking it was, especially a little bit when the school was clear down there where that ravine was that we found, and you would have had to back up to the south with everything from there because the school was right on that end, and that other road that went on down to the west a little bit, and so all of that was interesting to find, and I just wish I had another 4 or 6 hours to be over there and do some more scouting around. If there's any way we could gather up 20 cents and put that together, I'd go back there in a heartbeat and take some of it, and we'd go and do some more. Look, everybody needs to look at the pictures as much as we did for a while, and then the minute you get over there, you can put this with that and think, well, wait a minute, look at the tree line in the back, over above back where town was, because when you're looking at the mill looking to the north, kind of a little bit more north than northwest, you can see the tree line, and the tree line is the same today. So if you look at that and evaluate where those pieces of buildings were over there with the old barns started down to the south, and then as the town got to the northerly there a little bit, you could see where all that is, and to find out that. But I know that we were on that main street. We were on that because there was a part of an old basement, and it was cleared enough that there was not a lot of stuff growing, and where that ravine come up through there, and that picture that we've got, that had to be out in front of the post office and along in there, the store. That's about where that had to be, and you look at that. And there's no question in my mind that we kind of got situated, and to think that you're walking that street. My grandmother had walked and run to school, and all the horses and buggies and Mrs. Swanson and Eva back and forth up with the buggy, and all over seeing what's going on, and the provisions coming off of the boat. That had to go to the store and had to be taken up there via horse and wagon and whatever. If you could jump back in time, I wish you would be able to do that, because that would be so interesting to be able to do. It'd be like my grandmother lived.
This is a result of all that history.
This is the book that we had got done with a lot of help from a lot of people and a lot of pictures and museum people, Dave Tehoon, Kim Kilderhouse, books from Dave Hobie and Susan Wasserman, history stuff that we passed back and forth, and without everybody's help, you couldn't make what we think was quite an addition to the history of North Manitou Island. And here's the back. There's about 186 pages and about 300 photographs in this book, and we try to tell a little bit about the pictures. So a little bit of it's repetitious with different pictures of the sawmill, but when you look at them from different angles, north to south and east to west a little bit, to try to pinpoint kind of what stuff is, you can see different things that are going on within the photos. And the same thing happens when you look beyond the photo to see the town, the main street in the background, way in the back, and you look and you can see that that's a barn, and this is part of Main Street, and different pictures of what went on in the town people, what the kids and the people, and we've got quite a lot of pictures of town and people's names, which we think is kind of unique, which a lot of books don't have, and names of people with the mill, and whether they were the log people logging, whether they were railroad people, whether they were people that worked on the docks, everything. A lot of the names were the keys with what helped make it work. So we're pretty proud of this and hope that there's a lot of people that like the history of Leelanau County and our counties here in general, and the amount of story that we had to tell, because it was lived and it was saved by our family, and those two things put together, along with some help from other people, it's pretty hard not to come up with quite a lot of information and a lot of history that's informative to people. We'd like to think.